get here. It's a long journey. Lots of snow in Toronto. I wanted to talk a little bit about testing. A quick introduction to our organisation. More than IT, we do focus on a broader range of solutions. We started to secure from a platform, broader application that we built on the platform, especially to convert all of those applications to one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that just like the last talk I gave, and we take a very independent perspective on various solutions.
Yeah, and is this working, this thing? This is the, that was the thing that I was given. That's what I thought. Yeah. I'm clicking away at the wrong. How's that? Why don't we go with this? Yeah. Like that. How's that? And that works too. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about objectivity. So, you know, we don't build or sell any third-party apps. We don't intend to build or sell any third-party apps. That effectively means is as a solution partner, when we sit down with you and talk about a particular segment or a category of apps, we've nothing in the game. We're purely independent. And one of the reasons why we decided to go down that road, because it's very tempting to get into the app space, right? I mean, it's fantastic long-term income. You know, instead of having to go out and sell consulting jobs all the time, or even just licenses, you can just live off that revenue. We just decided that there was so much competition out there. It's such a rich marketplace that the real opportunity is to basically actually just give independent advice and to try to build centers of excellence around various functional areas. And one of them is project management, portfolio management, like I talked about before. And another one is testing. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, we're going to talk about the road rules and the spirit of the assessment. So I want everybody to be nice and polite. We're going to talk about testing, what it's all about, criteria for assessment, introduce you to this concept called APEX, Application Excellence Matrix. The three products that we're going to cover are test management for Jira, the Adaptivist product, X-Ray, and Zephyr. We're going to focus just on the server products, server add-ons. I've got a little bit of cloud pricing later. Our general experience with cloud is that it is really tends to lag the server product in terms of features. That's not always the case, but it has been our experience with other apps. Then we're going to do more of an assessment and a detailed head-to-head and talk about some recommendations about the apps. So just to cover off a couple of the ground rules, I don't want to see any of this. If I say something about your favorite app, okay, please don't take it out on me. So if your product is here, it's because you're already very successful. We picked the three top server third-party apps, not the standalone as testing apps. That's why we picked them. There are opinions in this. There are some facts. Trouble with the facts that we have is that the market changes very quickly. The app vendors concerned are releasing very frequently. That's always the trouble with doing a snapshot. I'm not a detailed expert. If you start asking me really detailed questions about this nuance of test management or this particular feature, I'm just going to look at you and go, I'm sure I have an expert in my team who can answer that question. So please make your own mind up. There is no perfect answer, and we'd like you to use this to help you make the right decision. Okay, so that's primarily why we've gone about doing this approach. Probably a bit difficult to see that, but I know you've got TVs. reviewing your app options is really typically the first part of a journey to implement that final option. You could go through a long-winded requirements review, not very agile. Most of these apps already offer terrific functionality out of the box. So it's probably a good idea to do some detailed reviews right away. So let's talk about testing. This is kind of one of my favorite slides in terms of, how testing people will look at a bug. A developer isn't very happy with the bug, and a manager is really unhappy with the bug, right? But I don't know about you guys, but we all live with bugs. We live with defects. I've ran some large programs. My own background is that I ran large programs in large-scale financial institutions. And so what I very much saw was testing teams that were set up to protect the organization from releases that could cause significant harm to the bank's interests. And the more critical the applications, such as, online banking, wealth management, those sorts of applications, you probably will start to see some very significant testing functions evolve. In organizations where testing is more lightweight and speed is of the essence, you see testing as being a much more integrated function. So the testing world really, tends to operate around this concept of a test plan, there are test cases, and there are test executions. So at the end of the day, instead of these other things that developers think of, testers think of things in terms of their test planning. Now, I do have some colleagues in the agile world who think that this isn't really the right thing at all, and that all testing should be done and all planning should be done through the lens of sprints and iterations and that kind of an approach. But in reality, that's great to say that, but actually nearly everybody who's in the testing world thinks of it kind of in this model. Now, just another thing that I wanted to mention is that a part of what's grown the testing app market has been really the demise, one could say, of the HPQC application. Everybody familiar with HPQC? You probably all heard of it. They've been acquired by Micro Focus, and Micro Focus has traditionally been considered to be a bit of a graveyard for these kinds of products. And so we had, especially over the last year and a half, a number of corporate clients who are exiting stage left as fast as possible off the HPQC world. But it's important to know in that venue that they're very demanding. And at HPQC was a very rich application that had grown up with a large number of tools. So testing folk can be, just like their rigor around, checking for defects and bugs, can be very demanding in what they're expecting. And so when we think of testing, one of the biggest questions we always, get from management is, how is testing going to impact my plan? And of course, there's no way we know the answer to that, right? It's impossible. Bugs will come and they will be either prioritized or they'll be dealt with differently. I'm having trouble with this again. Hang on. Okay. So although this is a bit ugly, I'll just take you through it. Essentially, the normal part of the software development lifecycle is I have my requirements, I probably have some epics, I have some stories, I'm going to go about implementing software, and I'm going to have backlog. Now, agile teams will often say that they believe that the stories themselves should have the acceptance and the test case criteria in them. But in reality, there's often a wall where I have my code, my functionality, my automated build tests, and these automated builds and tests, plus the testing that's also going to be taking place, is going to generate a set of defects. The most important thing, right, though, is that the defects don't sit somewhere else in some other system, some other universe. They've got to get into the backlog of the development team so that they can be prioritized so somebody can do something about them. And that's really where a lot of teams have had difficulties with separate siloed testing systems such as HPQC. They've had difficulties getting the backlog, getting the defects into the backlog fast enough. So that's really been, that's kind of a little bit of a history of what we have. So, okay, so I've laid the sort of the framework, if you like, for thinking about testing. But you know, there are so many third-party apps. Where do we start? You'll note that there are some 1,766 apps in the Jira space. And really, we're talking about an app in testing that's predominantly for Jira. There's a lot of overlap in this. There are these categories as well. You'll see down here in testing, there's 174 apps. What we found in the third-party app categories is they're pretty lumped together. Like if you look at the draw category, which is really, you know, a Glyphy or Draw.io, there's still dozens of different apps that find their way into that category that aren't really relevant. So the other thing then becomes, okay, so you pick a few apps that you want to explore, but it's basically pick me, I'm the #1. I'm the top rated app in the market. Buy me, I am the best, right? You know, that's pretty well what you see kind of advertised on all these apps. So here's 2 examples. X-Ray Test Management for Jira is the #1 manual and automated test management app. And, you know, this one, Test Management for Jira, is the #1 rated QA and test management app for Jira. Well, so then the question becomes, well, wow, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to decide which is the right app for me, potentially? So let's talk about market share for a second. Back in October, when we first wrote the white paper, this is what we found. If you go to the marketplace, you know, you've all been to the marketplace, right? You know what I'm talking about when you go searching for a third-party app. You'll see that it has reviews and it also has active instances, right? And so what's great about the marketplace is it really tells you, is this app a consequential app? Is it a, you know, is it a big one? Is it new? You can even check out the number of versions that the app has had. So you can see in this snapshot for these particular products that Zephyr is astoundingly the largest market share, with X-Ray coming in at just under 3,500 or 18%, and TM4J at 2263. Kind of interesting. But then what we did was we then compared their growth in the last 5 months. And back as of January the 5th, this is what we discovered. We discovered that X-Ray had the largest amount of growth on a largest size, closely followed by TM4J. But what really surprised us was the very small amount of growth in Zephyr. That really was a bit of a surprise. Now, we've subsequently talked to Zephyr, or SmartBear as they're now, as they've now been acquired by SmartBear, and they have had a bit more growth in the last month. I think they've got about another 100. They say they have about another 100, but we would expect to see these guys have grown as well. So the net of this is that really TM4J and X-Ray are the faster moving products out of the 3. So how did we go about then doing this assessment? We looked at 2 key factors, Jira Mesh, which we'll explain in a sec, and features. So obviously the features that a particular app brings to you are kind of key. Do they support the testing lifecycle? Do they not? And then Jira Mesh means, to what extent does this app actually leverage the features of Jira as a platform? And then we also looked at market share. Jira Mesh, third-party apps work with Jira, right? You have to understand whether they leverage what Jira has to offer. We all know that Jira is a powerful platform. It has boards, it has dashboards, gadgets, queries. It's got a whole bunch of stuff, right? And we just really wanted to make sure that these apps kind of live in this platform as opposed to standing kind of solo. We also know that issues integrate with Confluence and Bitbucket and Bamboo. So if an issue, so that issue is very important in terms of the architecture of a solution. If you want that Confluence linkage and the additional linkages, We also generally don't like third-party apps that introduce just a reconfigured issue type. There are some third-party apps out there that simply say, hi, I'm a new issue, and this is my new workflow. And we're like, well, actually, we could have configured that ourselves, and we don't need to pay for it. So that's kind of Jira Mesh. So let's do a fly-through then of the various apps. The first thing we looked at from a 360-degree perspective was support. We looked at the 3 websites for the support, and we were a bit disappointed in the Adaptivist web support platform. It kind of reminded us of a Confluence page, and it's good, like it's thorough, it's got all the stuff in it. It just doesn't jump out at us as a kind of like a world-class software support platform. The second thing is that TM4J is more of a standalone app. So what this means is that testing function, that testing lifecycle that I spoke to you about before, the test cases, the tests, the test executions, they don't live in Jira per se. They tend to live inside a box. And so when you get into the interface, what you'll see is that these items, even the custom fields, they're not Jira issue types, okay? They're kind of part of a product, if you like, that lives inside of Jira. Now, there are other apps that are very similar to that. So EasyBI would be a good example of that. But EasyBI does that because of scalability and performance. It's a very deliberate thing, and it's a very resource-intensive application. But nevertheless, this is the way that TM4J goes about it. Just quickly on the pros, very good reporting. Again, though, self-contained with the within the app, because everything is inside the app, right? It does provide simpler configuration, and therefore beneficial to some classes of users, because if I don't, for instance, really like configuring Jira, if I don't really like issue types, if workflows aren't for me, then maybe this is a simpler thing for me to deal with. The simplified configuration is available at the project level. That's pretty flexible. And it's a very feature-rich offering to support the actual lifecycle for testing. As we mentioned, though, test entities and artifacts can't really easily be linked to Jira entities. So what you're missing really is kind of that broader picture of Jira Mesh with this. Obviously, the filters aren't available, nor the traditional gadgets or dashboards. And then if you happen to need to have other integrations like tempo, if you wanted to record time against tests, you're going to have problems with that too, because of exactly the same problem. Scalability is a bit of an open question. We'll talk a little bit about X-Ray and some of the challenges, that X-Ray has over scalability, but scalability is only going to operate in the context of how efficient this application operates at. It won't be like saying the indexing of Jira has just improved by 100%. You're not going to work off the scalability of the inherent Jira application. And right now, and I believe this is changing, in fact, it's changing with all the products, there does seem to be a lack of native code and build integrations. But again, I think a little bit of that is tied to the fact that they can't leverage those integrations of Jira itself. Okay, let's talk about X-Ray. X-Ray, by contrast, is a very dedicated company. It tests. That's what its mantra is. When you go to its website, it's all about, guides, case studies, product walkthroughs, webinars. There's even a simple login to your own instance, make your own user right away, and be able to test. So we liked the web presence of X-Ray. We felt it was the strongest of the 3. By contrast, X-Ray has a sort of total mesh where they have the ability to pass out the various testing functions from a requirements project. There can be a test project with the tests, the preconditions, the test sets, the test plans, and the test executions. They're all issues in test executions projects and so forth. So it's a very, it's a richer application that really takes into account all of the functionality of Jira. As a result, you can imagine the traceability reporting is kind of key. And by traceability, what I mean is that what these apps really do provide beautifully is this ability to see a requirement or a story that I'm basically responsible for building. You know, I can see which test generated which bug, and I can see, you know, how it all hangs together over that life cycle, right? That traceability reporting is the holy grail for testing. X-ray pros and cons, fully meshed with Jira, very strong test case repository. My team also comments that in comparison to the other two products, X-ray is the most like HPQC. In other words, what they did was they said, all the people coming from HPQC land with folders, with test cases in those folders, everything folder driven, X-ray really does do that particularly well. And it speaks really to people who have much more of a testing focused mindset. And it's very strong on integration, and it's got excellent documentation. It does involve that additional configuration management, which is inherent because it leverages everything that Jira has. If you really love Jira and you're really strong at configuring it, it's not really a con, but not everybody can be thought of in that way. For large instances, there are some scalability concerns. What happens in testing, if everything is an issue type, you've got a lot of tests, you've got a lot of test cases, you know, there's a lot more activity in the system that this generates. And that can pose some real problems when it comes to very large instances. Obviously, with the performance improvements, indexing, archiving, that's going to be less of a concern. Okay, let's talk about Zephyr. They have a nice website too. I don't like it as much as X-ray. It's a little bit old school, but nevertheless, it's very focused. When you hit Zephyr's website, it's all about testing. Zephyr, incidentally, of the three, is the only one that has a fully standalone sort of enterprise application. It's interesting though, a lot of our clients have said to us, well, Miles, you know, if we're getting rid of one HPQC enterprise application, why do we want to get another one? We want to go with this test together concept, bring everybody together on the one instance. It's got a nice, clean interface. You just access it, you know, down the left. You can see the whole story pretty easily. It's got a very nice and simple traceability report. Here you can see the requirements through the tests, the executions, and the defects. Again, requirements to tests is kind of key and is done using linking, issue linking, right? Because that's an inherent feature of Jira. If you don't have that functionality, it's very difficult to produce that scalability report, that's a traceability report that you'll be looking for. Some basic pros, as a good importer. My team who's done Zephyr has implemented all three of these apps, likes Zephyr the best in terms of the setup. They reckon it's the fastest to set up, the easiest to set up. They like it. It does have some folder structure now, but it's only tied to test cycles. It's apparently weak on preconditions for test cases. Who knew? It's enabled globally rather than at the project level, which is a bit of a thing. We'd like to see apps that you can just set up at the project level. And it's actually the most expensive. So let's talk about pricing. And this could be where Zephyr has had some real problems. You can see here, this is the relative pricing of Server. And as you start to come down here, it gets more expensive. Quick comment about this. Zappy is the integration tool that Zephyr sells, which enables you to do all that funky integrated automated testing and all of that kind of stuff. They are rolling Zappy into Zephyr, and they say that they should have that done by Summit. Now, whether that means they'll increase their prices, I don't know. But you can see they become relatively more expensive. You can see that at 5,000 users, they're at 73 cents a user, whereas X-ray is obviously very determinedly buying market share at that level. This is a really hard chart for you to see. probably easier for you to see it up there. I did want to have just an end-to-end view of this. If you send an email to miles@blended.net, I'll just send you a copy of the deck. So you've got it, and then you can go through this. Essentially what these features are: project configuration, design. So that's creating, editing, deleting test cases, all the way that test cases get set up, planning, test plans, execution of the test plans, and traceability are considered to be, if you like, the key lifecycle features for testing. We borrowed this Interworks framework, but I also had our guys take a look at it. And as you can see, X-Ray and Zephyr and TM4J broadly all support this functionality. X-Ray the most, Zephyr not so much, and I'd say TM4J comes in second. Over here, when it comes to automation though, you can see that certain specific automation case studies at the time we did this analysis weren't supported other than by X-Ray. And it was generally our consideration that X-Ray was the strongest when it came to automation and integration. So how does it all come together? A way to look at this, as we said before, was feature richness versus Jira Mesh. It's our belief generally that TM4J is the second best feature-laden product, hence its position here. We don't think Zephyr is as strong as TM4J. It's definitely larger, but in terms of Jira Mesh, X-Ray we think is the winner. So that doesn't necessarily mean you should buy X-Ray. It just means how do we view the products in terms of their relative position in a view. So probably if you're a smaller organization with say less than 100, 200 IT staff, and you want a simpler application for testing, Zephyr could be a great choice, okay? But bear in mind it's the most expensive app, which is a bit unfortunate. If you're a larger organization and testing is fairly compartmentalized, and that is that whole business of linking everything together, using issue types, that kind of functionality. And you're not that fussed, and you're not really keen on all that Jira administration, and integrations and automated testing isn't required, then TM4J is probably an option. But if you're a larger enterprise and you're looking for something to really, really take the place, I think, of HPQC, and you want a full-strength, highly configurable solution, right now, X-Ray is probably the best product. It's also the winner on price, which is kind of a bonus. I don't think you should really make a decision on these products based on price. I mean, it's such an important category. It's such an important, space that you should just pick the product that's best for you. It just may not be that there are some agile teams that don't need automation, they don't need integration, and it might just be that those features are unnecessary for them. Okay, that's it. That's pretty quick.
So questions. All right, you know what? I'm gonna come over there because I'm not sure where's the cube. Himanshu, can you just pass the cube over to? I think you can throw it around now.
Thank you. Hey, Miles, a couple of quick questions. You talk about the test cases being issue types.
Yep.
How do they? I'm not sure. I've looked into some Zephyr, and I saw only one issue type, which was test. Is that mean it was probably not configured correctly?
Test is a test case.
That test was an issue type in the Jira configuration.
Yeah.
Okay. Should there be lots of issue types if you're using Zephyr?
I'm trying to remember exactly which one. I think I don't think test plans is an issue type. Hang on.
Because you were talking about having lots of issue types, especially with X-Ray.
In X-Ray.
So X-Ray then creates everything as an issue type?
Yeah, the X-Ray has more issue types
I see.
than Zephyr.
Okay.
Zephyr has only one type.
Yeah.
That's what I had seen
test.
too.
That's right.
That's what I saw too. I was confused by what you had said. One other quick question. Did you guys think about looking at Q-tests in your analysis?
No.
Okay.
Should we have done?
Well, I mean, we have a fair amount of experience right now with Q-Test. I would say, you know, my general sense is it is by far the most expensive, but also, you know, for if you're an enterprise scale test, you know, organization, it's worth taking a look at only because it really does, it does the full enterprise scale testing, and it does have its own module, its own standalone module
Well,
as well.
that's what I was going to say, is that we didn't look at it because it wasn't part of our mandate.
Okay.
We were interested in the add-on, the third-party apps that live.
There is an add-on. I mean, it does also have its own standalone, like Zephyr does as well.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Just a quick survey here. How many use one of these three tool sets here? Okay, so it's a review. Are there any others that people use? Just maybe tell names.
You guys agree with what my analysis or not? Yes. Sort of. Maybe. Okay. Which one do you have? Okay. Yeah. The thing with Zephyr is, again, this is the feedback from my team, is that apparently you need to copy your test cases over from project to project as well, which is a bit of a hassle. So their immediate comment to me was, you know, that X-ray, and certainly we've seen head-to-head evaluations by clients find X-ray to be a functionally superior product. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Everybody wants a beer. Yeah.
My question is, can you tell us again, analysis was done, was it October of last year? Sorry. Hi.
The analysis for the marketplace, the market share.
The analysis was done in October for just the market share based on how many active instances?
Yeah, so if you go, I'll bring up the slide.
My follow-up question was about the features, though, like just quickly looking at some of the marketplace listings that were there, it seemed like a few of the items that you mentioned were contradicted in the description. So I was just wondering if that was because it was from new releases that just came out. And
you know what? It's a moving target, right?
Yeah.
We find it difficult to keep up with where is it there? Yeah. These were the active instances back in October. And these were the ones about a week and a half ago.
But the actual analysis, the pros and cons that you were showing, was that from the same time frame?
It was initially, but we've tried to keep track of it. Is there something there that you think that's been released that is different?
Well, I saw a couple of items. Obviously, I'm a little biased because I do work for Adaptivist.
Right.
I mentioned to you earlier, I've never actually used Test Management for Jira myself. I'm new there, and this isn't something I've worked on. But it seems like there are more opportunities for integration than what was being presented here.
Could be.
So
yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The Zephyr guy sent me a list of things that he wanted us to take a look at, and you're welcome to do the same. You know, so why don't you just send me a note? I'll send you a copy of the deck.
Okay.
And you guys send me a note and say, Miles, these are the things that have changed.
I will do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think the thing about the product is that because it doesn't leverage a whole lot of Jira in its makeup, it misses out on all of the things that Jira does natively to integrate. So Bamboo is a good example, right? Bamboo is an automated build engine that's literally looking at a version to do an automated build. That's not really a part of a world that doesn't understand that, you know, a test is an issue type. So there's just some that's probably the most important thing that we concluded.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? QA?
Oh,
Ben. All right.
I believe they're all data center compatible. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
They all have data center specific pricing.
That's a good question.
The question was, do they all have data center pricing?
That's not something I've looked at. I can get back to you. But is it the same though, Nick? A lot of them are the same. Right. Yeah.
Anything on QA? No QA questions. No QA developers or guys don't do QA. All right.
We just released it to production.
All right. If there are other questions, I just want to thanks Miles. Sarah, so your round of applause. And again, Miles and Ben, of course, will be here for the remainder of the evening. So if you do have any questions, for them as well. Okay. All right. I think we're coming to the end of the evening here. So of course, we will have our raffles for the prizes. So get out your raffle tickets, as well as ensure that everyone got their raffles. Is that true?